So how does that relate to other people that are in our lives if their memories aren't aligned with ours because we've shifted frequencies and shifted the planet that we're on? How does that synchronize between the people in our lives and what we remember and what they think is true?
Well, again, as we have said, for a while, you are agreeing to play the game of continuing to be aware of people that have made different choices and are experiencing different things. You're allowing that to be part of your game for a while. Eventually, you won't. Eventually, there will be no, shall we say, disagreement on the overall picture of what you're experiencing when you have shifted to the version of Earth where everyone is relatively harmonious and in sync with one another. But for now, for the purpose of experiencing process and for the purpose of still giving yourself the opportunity to change your mind and make different choices, you have agreed, even during your shifting, to shift to versions of Earth where you're still aware that there are different choices you could make that may not be relevant or in alignment with what you prefer. That's part of the choice you're making for now, to give everyone a chance to make their choices, to see in you different experiences they could choose for themselves, and for you to see in them different ideas you could choose for yourself. That's part of the game you're playing, even while shifting to different versions of Earth.
So what kind of a timeline are we looking at with this in terms of when you would experience Earth and be experiencing people having similar memories to you?
Of course, it will vary from individual to individual, but again, we could say that the overall bubble would probably be about 50 of your years.
Okay, and so for those individuals who may not live for another 50 years, they would
Yes.
just experience varying degrees of that.
Yes. Again, it will be per individual. Some may go on ahead, some may lag behind. There may be an average to it. So you can't just say it's true for everyone, but we're giving you an overall average for the collective of your reality, barring the exceptions, about 50 years for everyone that you perceive in the version of Earth you're in to seem relatively harmonious
Oh.
to whatever idea, relatively in sync to whatever idea you're experiencing, whether it's positive or negative.
This question has to do with suicide.
Yes.
And the person is asking, are either of these statements true? Someone who commits suicide will usually come back in physical form more quickly than someone who has died of natural causes.
You want me to answer that one first?
Sure.
All right. Generally, that seems to appear to be the case, but only because when a person arrives in spirit, they may realize very rapidly that that wasn't necessarily the choice they initially would have made, and they wish to finish the theme that they chose to explore. So they will look for an opportunity to do so in physical reality. Now, that's not necessarily true for everyone. Some may continue their theme of exploration much later, or in a different dimension, or even as a non-physical being. But in general, when you make a choice to experience a certain thing from the spirit level to begin with, linearly speaking, you usually want to stick to it and finish the job. So many times people that commit suicide will suddenly awaken to the fact that they did make a choice initially that was very important to them, and they will usually look for an opportunity to go back into the situation, at least something similar, so they can finish the theme they chose to explore relatively quickly, linearly speaking. So on average, in general, yes, there's validity to that, but it's not absolutely true for everyone.
Okay. And also, is this statement true? A being could get stuck in a dimension if they commit suicide.
No. They may think they're stuck. They may create an experience of being stuck for a while, but again, only because of the belief systems they may have brought in with them. Eventually that will dissolve because they have help from physical reality for those individuals who are sensitive to such things. And they have help from their spirit guides in non-physical reality as well. So they can have the experience of being stuck, but they're never actually stuck. That's just an illusion.
Okay, and also the idea that if someone is terminally ill and they are in great suffering and they choose to have assisted, suicide, I suppose,
Yes.
does that come with the same idea of what you were saying in the first
No,
question?
no, not necessarily. Again, as always, you can't make a general concept true for everyone. It depends on the reason they're doing it. It depends on why they have attracted that situation to begin with. But in general, in the way you're asking the question, no.
Okay, great. So there are, there's legitimate reasons for quote
Yes.
unquote suicide.
Well, again,
And then
remember, all death is suicide because mostly you have determined the window of your lifespan.
And then basically the choice of how you exit is something having to do with opportunity, but it may also have to do with the other people that are involved in your life,
Yes.
etc.
Again, you have to take it, as always, on a case-by-case, person-by-person basis to see why someone has chosen what they have chosen and why they're experiencing it in that way. But in answering the question generally, the answer is generally no. It's not the same as if you commit suicide through the idea of desperation or fear.
You mentioned sometime that there are spirits that rematerialize into physical form on Earth. What is the longest time a spirit has remained physical on Earth after dying? And was this spirit human, animal, or plant?
I'm not allowed to tell you about that at this particular point.
Okay. All right. And you've said that cats communicate with elementals.
Very often, yeah.
When do cats learn to speak to elementals? Is it instinctive from birth? Are there telltale signs when the cat is doing that? And what is the conversation usually about?
It is instinctive from birth. You can usually tell, though not always, when they focus on something that you say isn't there, that you can't see, but they seem very attentive in a particular direction. Now, that's not always the case. They might be looking at something you just can't see with your own eyes. That is still in physical reality because they have very sharp senses. But again, it can look similar. They can be engaged with something that you can't see, and you can tell they're engaged with something by their focus, their head motions and body language and so on and so forth. Very often, though not always the case, what it's about is something that either has to do with the cat and its relationship to you, or it has to do with things that the cat can experience when it's out of body and the cat's life in general or specific terms. But a lot of it will usually have to do with things that are going on in the life of the human and the cat and the relationship between them and how that might progress and evolve to including the elemental in some way, shape, or form that can be of assistance to the lives of the humans and the cats, and other animals participate in this as well. It's not just cats. But they do have a strong proclivity for this kind of activity.
Okay. What sort of mind structures do plants have, and how different is it from mammals? Do they ever dream, reflect, or use archetypes to communicate like humans do?
Absolutely, they do, but we're not going to go into a deep explanation now, but they have a difference in the way that they experience those things. It's a different form of reflectivity. It's a different experience of an archetypal connection. But we will go into that at some other point in more detail. But yes, they have all those things, just different.
Do you want to comment at all on this cryptid that is called Dogman?
Not at this time.
Okay, and from your point of view, what is the relationship between power animals and sacred plants, as in shamanism, and humans? Who are they, and how can we develop a stronger and healthier connection with them?
Sacred animals are animals. Sacred plants are plants. Every plant has a sacred aspect. Every animal has a sacred aspect. Every human has a sacred aspect. It's more about the level from which the shaman is experiencing a relationship with those animals, those plants, or those other people. Because coming from a higher level, a shaman can see and perceive different levels of those beings, no matter what they are. So it's more about the idea of the sacred level that exists in all things being more perceivable to the shaman, because the shaman has evolved to the level where they're interacting not just with the typical physical representations, but with the higher dimensions and levels of spirit of those animals and plants and humans and other things as well.
Okay. Thank you. Are there tones, pineal tones, that help with balancing our mind and also could have other effects with the pineal gland?
Yes, and we will discuss this concept at another time as well, but the short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay, so on to some ET galactic type questions that we have.
Yeah.
If someone passes to the other side of a black hole, what will they see?
Depends on the black hole, because there can be black holes that are tunnels to other points in space-time. There can be black holes that are portals to other realities, other universes altogether. It depends on the type of black hole.
So these sounds, I think they just recently came up with a recording of the sound of a black hole. Was that accurate?
The sound, in a sense, is a reconstruction of the idea of the perturbations that exist within the space-time field as you recognize it in your terms. So it's the fluctuations in the space-time field, the gravitational fields, the fields of consciousness that are being interpreted in your terms to create a sound as you understand sound. What you're basically hearing is a representation of fluctuations in space-time.
And what would happen if a person went to the end of the universe and left it? What would they see? I know it's going to be vary, but...
Again, you're assuming, first of all, there is an end,
right,
in the classic sense, to the universe. But we understand the context of the question. It depends. Again, you might see another universe. You might not even know you've crossed from one to another. The end may be apparent and it may not be. It just depends. Again, this requires a deeper conversation, but the general answer is it depends.
Okay. And are there any spacefaring ETs who are basically life-size animated plants?
In a sense, yes. You would perceive them in that way. You would perceive them to be plant life, although they would be a little bit different than what you perceive on Earth as plant life. But yes, there are those extraterrestrial beings that do appear to possess more qualities you would attribute to the concept of plants.
What about situations where someone has taken something that elevates their frequency, some sort of hallucinogenic or plant-based idea, and they experience things like communication with DNA and things like that? Yeah. Is that basically similar to the idea of interacting with a plant type consciousness that is an extraterrestrial?
Well, yes, because it can be a reflection of dealing with the consciousness of a plant that is terrestrial and therefore may cross into the idea of communication with an extraterrestrial type plant as well.
So they can deliver information from that microscopic level in a sense also.
Possibly.
Okay, and why do extraterrestrial crafts have light? Lights on them. Are they a device for attracting our attention and raising our awareness, or do they serve a purpose?
Well, there are many levels to that. Many craft have lights in the same way that your cars have lights. Remember, it's dark out in space. Therefore, the lights help to identify what's there. But a lot of the so-called lights are not lights as you understand them. They're expressions of energy. So they can be representative of many different things that are not necessarily physical lights in the way you understand the technology. It may be the manipulation of energy that has a light as a side effect.
Okay, and will there be people who immigrate to Essassani, and how would that work in the Interstellar Alliance?
Eventually, there may be those that will come to live on different planets relatively permanently, yes. In the future, when you are a full-fledged member of the Interstellar Alliance, that is a common thing for individuals to do as long as the planet can support their form of life. Just like you would go to live in another country. There is nothing mysterious about this.
At the present time, though, individuals who are experiencing Essassani would basically be doing it in dream time in that form.
In their astral form, yes. Eventually, it can be physical. There are humans who have been taken to other planets physically. We're not going to go into detail about a lot of that right now. But there are humans who do reside on other planets. It's rare, but it has happened.
And are there subterranean intelligences living alongside humans on this planet?
There are some. That doesn't mean there's a hollow earth in your dimension. But there are some subterranean beings that do exist on your planet simultaneously with you. There are not many. Mostly those that you would consider to be other civilizations, subterranean, are in other dimensions that just appear to be inside your planet. But there are a few physical beings that do live in subterranean enclaves on your planet that you are not necessarily aware of. Yes.
How prevalent is it that there are ships in the oceans?
Do you mean extraterrestrial craft?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
It's relatively common because there are bases under the oceans, under the ocean floors, and are visited quite often by various extraterrestrial crafts, just as there are bases that are also underground on land and bases on your moon and Mars.
Are there a number of bases on the, within the Hawaiian Islands?
There are a couple. All right, a few.
Can I ask about a specific location?
If you wish. Doesn't mean I'll answer you.
Okay. Kealakekua Bay?
Nearby.
There have been sightings there.
Nearby.
Nearby.
Nearby. Not in it, but nearby.
Okay. Are the beings responsible for creating our species and our scientific level of intelligence also responsible for the nuclear weapons that this intelligence has produced?
If you're referring to the idea of the Anunnaki, they did have a science that was understood by some that did allow for the development of nuclear devices. They didn't provide them, though, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. And did the Sasquatch interact heavily with the Conestoga people, who are also known as the Susquehannock, found on the Susquehannock River? And if so, modern people believe this culture is extinct because of conflict in the 1700s. Did some of them travel with Sasquatch to other dimensions?
Yes. And that's all we will say about that.
Okay. And are ancient Egypt giants Anunnaki?
Some of them certainly have a lot of Anunnaki blood. They are mostly ancient Atlanteans that have a lot of Anunnaki blood, many of which still existed on Earth in the late periods after the destruction, the third phase of destruction of Atlantis, and became known as the Anunnage. You can look them up. Anunnage, Anannage, Anunnage, which is a corruption of Anunnaki. But many of these are ancient Atlanteans who survived and went to different areas on your planet that had a lot of Anunnaki blood.
Okay, and this is a question about the U.S. congressional hearings on the UFOs.
Yes.
Well, first of all, does that foreshadow a change in the collective energy leading to the beginning of the open window of contact?
It does, of course, even though not much information actually was offered in that meeting. The fact that it is recognized as a public meeting that professes to take the subject seriously is a step forward in the evolution of contact. Yes, of course.
And this person is saying, I read that the U.S. government or military doesn't want to admit UFOs are from outer space and friendly because then there would be no need to have huge budgets to protect ourselves against them. Is that accurate or?
Yes. In general, yes. There are exceptions, but yes.
And in the news this week, there was also a picture of a doorway on planet Mars. And is that picture true?
No comment.
Okay. All right. And there'll be a device in the future that will help access the unconscious mind and discover our negative beliefs. Can you tell us what kind of a device that would be?
It will be an AI device.
And is it connected with the internet? Because you've talked about how we would be able to talk with our higher minds through the internet. I guess it's sort of a representation of that idea.
It's not the internet as you know it, but it will be something similar.
Okay, and can you tell us something about advances in health and medicine, what they might look like that would help us continue to evolve and move towards greater and greater open contact?
Eventually, it will all be based on the understanding of resonance and frequency of energy.
So eventually will we be able to like regrow limbs or
Yes.
restore senses?
Yes.
All of those things?
Yes.
And will it be through the use of AI? Because right now we already see that happening where
Partly, yes. It can be aided by AI, yes. But it has to do with frequency and resonance.
Okay. And lastly, this one says the cultural belief that change is created through rage, rejection, and punishment seems to be gaining momentum, at least in our society and maybe even worldwide. And can you help us understand what an individual can do to shift that so that we have a more smooth progression to our evolved future? Or is this whole period of quote unquote negativity that the world seems to be going through just part of our growth process to get us to that
on how you
place?
use it. As we have said, you're getting everything out on the table because it's the end of the cycle. You're shifting into a new cycle. You have to be able to see every possible choice and every possible opportunity to be a living example of better choices, of more positive choices, without necessarily needing anyone to choose them. But the idea is to be a living example of that. That's how you can help. But remember, again, you're never going to change the planet you're on. You're going to shift to another version of Earth that will be more and more reflective of the changes you make within yourself. But being a living example through the actions that you take that are more representative of a positive reality will allow those who are inclined to do so to also choose and match those frequencies in a more positive way. But again, the idea is unless you see all of the negativity, you won't know what choices necessarily there are to make or not make. So you're getting it all out on the table. So you give yourself the freedom to choose what you truly prefer and leave behind what you truly do not.
And for those that are concerned about nuclear in the current situations that are happening, you've mentioned that full-out nuclear war would not be allowed to happen on this planet because of the effect that it would have in other dimensions, etc.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, but limited nuclear strikes we cannot necessarily prevent.
So if there's a limited nuclear strike that then turns into a full-out exchange, is that would, like if there was a limited nuclear strike and then someone retaliated in a limited way, would that qualify as being allowed to happen, or would it only be that it would be stopped at that point?
We would gauge the ultimate effect of any reaction and determine whether or not it would reach the level where it would interfere with other dimensions. It will be allowed as long as it does not cross over into other realities that are not yours. As soon as it reaches the level where it would do so, it would be stopped.
Okay. And just in keeping with the idea that there are things happening on our planet that are very challenging for all of us, or a lot of us.
Yes.
In terms of a positive way to look at the war and what is happening, what is our best method for doing that?
Do not instruct you in that. You have made this too political, and we are not allowed into your politics that deeply. We would simply say, once again, look for those who exhibit the idea of courage, of strength, of positivity, of doing things in a way that can mitigate things without the idea of violence and force, but who also are willing to defend themselves. Allow yourself simply, again, to continue to be living examples and take the actions necessary to demonstrate to others that they do not have to operate out of fear, that they do not have to operate out of control and lack. It's up to you. It's your planet. We can only go so far in aiding and assisting you. You have to make the decisions that work for everyone in the most harmonious way and help those who live in fear to understand there is another way. We have to leave most of that up to you to use the tools we have shared with you in ways that can be of assistance and service to all. It's your planet.
Thank you, Bashar. We really appreciate your perspective and all that you share with us.
It is always our passion and our pleasure and our gratitude and appreciation for allowing these exchanges to occur. Depending upon what you do with this information will make all the difference in all the different versions of Earth that you choose to experience as you move forward on your evolutionary path. And in that light, we now invite you to participate and work with belief systems and what their function is. As we have explained previously in other transmissions, your belief system is basically the product of a triad of experiences, the beliefs, the emotions, the thought patterns that create your physical personality and generate your physical experience. But the triad function, the triad structure also exists between your physical conscious mind, physical subconscious mind, and physical unconscious mind. Now, as we again have said before, many people on your planet have thought of the subconscious and unconscious mind as somehow being underneath the conscious mind, below the conscious mind, because you talk about the idea of things being buried deeply in the subconscious or unconscious mind, and therefore it creates the connotation, the implication that these levels are actually under or below or beneath your physically aware daily conscious mind. They are not. They are above it. Because if you understand the idea of the higher mind, which sees everything, which knows everything about the path you are taking, the theme you have chosen to explore, which is the portion of your total consciousness that retains the big view and sees more clearly than the physical mind does what is going on and what is happening and why with respect to the theme that you chose to explore as a physical being, you will understand that because the higher mind knows everything, then the idea of the unconscious mind is also a very large repository of information. You may not always have access to it, but by having the largest repository of information, it is much closer to the idea of the higher mind and thus higher than the physical mind vibrationally. because it contains so much more than the physical mind is capable of handling at any particular moment. Next, the subconscious mind also, in many cases, contains more information than the conscious mind requires for its daily operation, its daily functioning, and thus again is above the physical mind. Again, kind of like not only a repository of more information, but here's the critical key. The subconscious functions between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind as a valve, as a filter, as a processing station between the two, allowing some information from the unconscious mind to come into the subconscious, which then gets processed and filtered in a way that it then can be passed along to, passed down to the conscious mind in whatever form is necessary for the conscious mind to receive that processed information in a way that is relevant and works for what the conscious mind needs to know, needs to realize, needs to experience in its journey of physical reality. So the idea of how these work together is that you have the physical mind, which is experiencing directly the physical idea, the physical journey, the physical experience. And you have the unconscious mind, which is the greater repository of all the information that will ever be needed to be experienced in this lifetime on this theme by the physical mind. But you have in between the two, the subconscious mind, which acts as the processing center, the filtering center, to be able to filter out whatever it is that the physical mind is not ready to handle, not ready to perceive, whatever is not relevant at that moment for the physical mind to know, but which the physical mind can allow to come through if the physical mind will work on belief systems that would be hindering or stopping that information from being presented from the subconscious mind to the physically conscious mind. So the relationship between the three-part belief system and its connection to the three-part consciousness triad is that the belief systems will work more directly with the subconscious mind, or the subconscious mind will work more directly with the belief systems to create the processes necessary to work out whatever it is necessary to be worked out so that the physical mind can more clearly and cleanly experience the themes of its exploration that it chose while in spirit, and thus allow itself to clear out those belief systems which will allow the subconscious mind to process things more efficiently, to let things through from the unconscious mind more quickly in a more accelerated way, so that there begins to be less barriers, so to speak, less imposed barriers, artificial barriers between the physical conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind. But while those barriers exist, because of whatever the belief systems say the physical mind does or doesn't wish to experience at that moment, either just through timing or through fear, then the idea is that the more you let go of those fear-based beliefs, then only the timing issues will be what allows the subconscious mind to process information from the unconscious and let it through to the conscious mind in a more timely fashion without being inhibited by any fear-based beliefs that the subconscious mind may be taking its cue from to hold back that information until the physical mind feels that it is absolutely ready to handle the information. You have a very, very, very large repository of information and knowledge in the unconscious mind. And therefore, based on the belief systems that allow you to determine when you are ready to be more of yourself, to explore and expand and be aware of more of who you are, the subconscious mind acts as that brake pedal, so to speak, that allows you to determine with your free will and your willingness to process and let go of your fear-based beliefs exactly when you believe you are ready to handle more information and allow the subconscious to process things more efficiently, more quickly, and allow yourself to receive more information that is being held in the unconscious mind that is representative of much more of the theme that you chose to explore as a physical being. So this is how these three components of consciousness in physical reality work together, kind of like a gas pedal, brake pedal sort of system in trinary fashion, to download whatever information to you are ready to receive based on how ready you are to know yourself more fully, based on how ready you are to be more aware of the themes you chose to explore, based on how ready you are to let go of those fear-based and limiting beliefs, negatively speaking, and bring them into positive realization. So you are, as the physical mind, in a sense, in the driver's seat with your hands firmly on the controls of what will allow the subconscious mind to bring through, to process through the information from the unconscious that can reveal to you more about who you are in a very inspirational way, giving you much more aha moments in life, as you say, allowing you to know yourself more deeply and to understand more clearly the theme that you chose to explore, which gives you more insight into where you're heading. In a sense, opening up the idea of whatever probable reality futures are more conducive and more in alignment with who you truly prefer to be, and allowing the theme that you chose to explore to be more informative as to what choices you can make more clearly, giving you discernment to understand what is and isn't true for you, and allow you to move forward in life, in your physical reality experience, in a much more joyful way. So this is how these components work together. Ponder this, let it sink in, absorb it, and continue to let go of those fear-based or negative beliefs, only allowing the timing issues to remain so that what is truly relevant for you in this moment, at any moment in the present, to come through efficiently without hindrance, without inhibition, and allow the subconscious and unconscious portions of your consciousness to work more fluidly together with the conscious mind.